Welcome to Foto Dojo, where you can explore making comics, cartoons, characters, stories, and imaginary worlds. With me, Adam Fotos, creator of Dragon and Goat, a comic about a dragon and a goat. Plus, he's a professor of humanities and friend of huge manatees. So we've been talking a lot about shapes and using different shapes to build your cartoon characters. And so what we want to concentrate in this video is how to make 3D shapes. So the difference between taking a flat shape like this rectangle and taking something that looks a little bit more three-dimensional. Now translating that into a drawing can be a little tricky, but there are some really easy tricks that you can start practicing to get better at drawing your own three-dimensional shapes. Now, 3D drawing is a fairly advanced skill, so I don't want that to discourage you from drawing your cartoons before you've really mastered any of these 3D shapes. You should be drawing over and over again, and these things can be great to like doodle and create, but don't get too caught up in your drawings right now not looking the best, because the important thing is that you're just drawing. Drawing is like a muscle. The more you flex it, the better you get, and then you'll be more comfortable to draw things out of your own imagination. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with some examples of how to draw a lot of different 3D shapes, and then we're going to talk about stacking those shapes to create characters. So thinking about how you can mix and match these different shapes to get characters with different personalities and sort of different depth. All right, so we're going to start off with the cube, and I'm going to show you two different ways to draw a good old cube like we've got here. So cube A and cube B. Now cube A is going to start off with just a regular old square. And see, when we're thinking about 3D, the 3D, the D is dimensional. And the dimensions we're talking about in 2D are height and width. So that's 2. The third one is going to be the depth. And so the depth is where we take this square, assuming these sides are pretty much equal, we're going to extend back into space, sort of the illusion of space, a line that goes back here, a line that goes back here, and a line that goes back here. Those lines, so these back ones, should be about the same length as each other. In isometric drawing, if you're drawing for like technical things, so if you end up doing product design or something like that, you'd have to make sure that this line was equal to this line if it's going to be a true cube, but we're not really too worried about that. In fact, in regular 2-point perspective or 1-point perspective like we've got here, we'll actually see that those sides shorten. And the angle changes a little bit, but for right now in our sort of rough sketches, we want to make sure these lines are pretty much the same length. So when those lines are the same length, we can then take and create a vertical line here in the back. That's going to be the back edge of the cube. If you have a little thing that comes off the back, you can just take care of that with your nifty eraser. And notice that this line and this line are parallel. They're also going to be parallel with this line. Now then that top edge you're going to take and create a horizontal line that's just a line like this. And that line is going to be parallel to this front edge of the cube, and then the back edge is parallel like that and like that. So you've got your first cube, cube A. So practice it, print off one of these sheets, and if you want to do it over and over again, you can always just sketch them on like a blank sheet of paper. You don't have to always use these sheets by any means. So with cube B, what we've got is cube B is going to be where we're going to sort of take a look at the cube from a slight angle. Now this is kind of like 1-point perspective. If we're looking at the edge of the cube, so with it slightly turned, we start off with drawing that edge just as a vertical line. Now what this is going to translate to, if we take our trusty building block here, if we look at that edge like that, It's that same line. So then that means that we've got to create this edge and this edge. But the first thing we do is we're going to create the angle line going back. Remember, keeping that or creating that sense of depth. So we're going to take the angle line going back like this top line, which is the top back edge of this right side. It's going to be the same angle. And if those end at the same point, you can create a vertical line parallel here, and then these two are parallel as well. That's what that little dash symbol means, at least if I'm remembering that correctly from geometry class like 30 years ago. I don't know, it was a long time ago, probably not 30. Okay, so then we're going to do this left edge of the cube going back. You notice how my line is kind of sketchy. I like to find my line so that they're nice and parallel. Don't get too caught up in them being perfect right now. And then connect the dots with that left edge. And so this line is going to be parallel to this line and this line. So then what you're going to do is you're going to create the back edge. Now for that one, you can just sketch a really light line extending back, and then I'm going to create another line back this way. And where those intersect, that's going to be the back corner of your box. Fantastic. So then we've got this line is parallel to this line and this line. And you'll notice this line is parallel to this line and this line. Again, they don't have to be perfect, but try to get it as close as you can. So moving on to the rectangular prism, not too much different than the square, except for a rectangle, you've got sort of different sizes. You've got your vertical rectangle, which might be like really tall and skinny, and then you've got your sort of wider rectangle, right? So you can sort of make it wider. And what we want to think about with the rectangular prism, with the two examples that I give you, is I want you to consider how, if we're going to be drawing these shapes, ultimately using them to build, like building blocks, our cartoon characters, how do these basic shapes that we use affect the personality of the character that we're going to be creating? So I'll show you this with the two rectangular prisms that we're going to sketch out. So the first one, I'm going to start with a tall, skinny rectangular prism. So we'll start the tall, skinny one here. Same way, we're starting with the edge, and then I'm going to do the, let's see, look, it makes like an arrow going back like that. And then you go up to the top and you do an angle going back to the right at the same angle here. And then this one's going to go back to the left like this. Then you're going to drop down a line to connect the dots. And this line, this vertical line, should be parallel to these guys. And then the same thing with this one. You're going to sort of sketch it down like that. So then that's got the front two faces of the rectangle. And then we're going to kick it back in the back here. And this is going to give you the top of the rectangular prism like this. So this is, just to sort of show you, like, let's put a face on this one. And if I really want to know like how those eyes should be placed, I can actually sketch like a little line that'll show me how to do those eyes, and then erase it once I draw them. And then I'm going to do like a little nose and then a mouth. All right. Now, with the sort of the height of the rectangle, that has a certain kind of personality that goes along with the eyes and the nose and the mouth that I'm choosing. So then the other one that I'm going to make, let's make that one more like cube A, but a wide rectangular prism. So with the cube A technique that we've got here to make a 3D shape, you can draw pretty much any shape and then just extend back parallel lines from each corner of that shape like I'm doing here. And then you draw the vertical back edge on the left and the top. Voila! Now, for this one, if I do a face, let's do kind of like a face like this. And then we'll do like a really wide mouth like that, and then maybe like a little nose there. So you can see like these two different shapes convey very different personalities to the basic faces that I'm creating or building on them. So it's good to think about, how can you use the sort of changes of shape, make it really tall and skinny or really wide, to change the characteristic or personality of the character that you're creating. The cylinder is a challenging shape, so give yourself a lot of, sort of leeway on this one as you're learning to draw it. It could be a bit tricky, but with the cylinder, what we're thinking of is, a tube-like shape like this. The top is a circle, and then the side is a sort of flat surface that wraps all the way around to connect to the bottom sort of circle that we've got there. Now with the cylinder, to make it look 3D, what we're going to do is concentrate on the top first, and then we're going to extend the sides down and then do that sort of like bottom corner bottom curve that we've got there. And it's actually like not too bad as long as you think about the points that you're connecting as you're creating. So for the cylinder, what I like to do is start off with with like a line, here we go, that tells me the width of the cylinder. And then at the end of the line, I'm going to do 2 points, one here and one here. Now this line should be fairly straight. It's fairly straight with like the frame edges that I have on the paper here. And then depending on how much you see of the top, I'm going to create a little dot up here. That's going to be the top edge of the circle. That's going to now be an ellipse. And I'm going to make another dot at the bottom the same distance. So it's going to be the same height here as it is here. And there's going to be a dot there. Then I'm going to sort of rope this down. And I'm going to create a curve that sort of ropes down to this one. So connecting from one point to the other. And then from this side corner, side point, I'm going to curve down, making sure it's sort of the opposite, like kind of an opposite or reflected curve here and here. Now I like to really, sketch these out so I'm kind of roughing it out, and it's a little tricky to do. So like I said, give yourself some sort of leeway to practice that. You'll develop a better eye for it the more cylinders you draw. So then the height of the cylinder is determined by the line that you draw here. So I'm going to sketch a line down here, and then I'm going to sketch this line down as well, and those lines should also be falling at the same spot so that I can create another line across the bottom edge here. I'm going to put 2 points there, and then this curve is going to fall the exact same distance. So whatever height I have here, I'm going to do that here. Now when I tell you that it's the same height, I don't want you to actually get out your ruler and measure things. Just work on deciding it. Just work with your eyes. Try to get it as close as you can just by eyeball. If you need to use a ruler, that can help you get a better sense of it, but I don't want you to get too fussy at this stage in the game. So then I'm going to create the bottom corner connecting from this point to this point, and then we're going to wrap up and connect from this point to this point. And then we've got our cylinder. With the cone starts exactly the same as the cylinder, and I'm going to show you 2 different options for the cone. We can look at the top of the cone, so sort of looking down like it's an ice cream cone with the point at the bottom, but we can also have a sort of flipped over ice cream cone like a birthday hat, and that's also a really great form to think about using for a body of a character. So to start off, we'll take, and I'm going to do just sort of a smaller cone here, but I'm going to create my line. I end it with 2 points, and then I'm going to draw a little line here and a little line here. This is the direct center of this line, or as close as I can kind of get. And then I'm going to create another point here and another point here. So just like I did with the cylinder. Then I'm going to curve up, and then I'm going to curve back down using that same curve. And then the underside of it is going to sort of wrap. I'm going to try to reflect it as best I can, looking at the shape that I've created here, and reflect that same shape here, and then do the same thing on this side. So that gives me a nice sort of ellipse tilted back in space, or circle tilted back in space, creates this ellipse. And then for the height of the cone, I'm just going to create a point, sort of drops down from the center here. And then from corner to corner, I just create a line here and a line here. And then that gives me my cone. Obviously, I can just, erase that if I want. Although sometimes it's nice to leave that if you're still drawing your character on top of it, to leave it. Now this is sort of the cone looking down on it. We could plop some ice cream right on top, and it would be a pretty easy shape to build a character on. For the flipped cone, what I do is, so we'll actually start with the bottom line. And I'm going to draw a line across here to connect these 2 points. And then I'm going to find the middle, do a little line down, and then create the curve here and the curve here. And then I'm going to draw a line up, and then the point where the cone is going to end. And then I just create a line to connect from this point to this point. There we go. Nice birthday hat. Now with this one, we're sort of looking at the cone from above looking down. So that's why we're not seeing that back edge. If you draw the back edge, that means that we're looking at it from the bottom, which is also, cool to see. So if we draw this line like this, can drop that line on the bottom, push it on the top, same distance from here to here to here to here, and then we curve it. And then we draw the point up at the top. It's the same height, but it looks different. It looks as though it's like a birthday hat that we could, see into at this point. So that's sort of like looking from the bottom. This is looking from the top and down. And the cone, just keep in mind, is a really good body shape because you can, plop another shape here, and you've got a very sort of like Charlie Brown looking character. Calvin and Hobbes, or Huey and Riley to some extent from Boondocks also use that same kind of shape. The trapezoid is a really good shape for building more complex characters too, especially if you're getting into more realistic figures. But it also can be a fun way to make some like quirky characters with kind of bizarre proportions at times. So with the trapezoid, what I'm going to do is we're going to do the trapezoid sort of at an angle. Let's see. So typically, or actually we'll do 2. So I'm going to do one where it's a front-facing trapezoid. So we would start with the bottom of the trapezoid like this, and then we draw up. The top line is going to be smaller, and then this line is going to angle down, sort of the opposite angle. These lines should be parallel, I think, to be technically a trapezoid. But then to extend it into space, just like we did with the cube, you're going back from the corners. And from every corner, you would extend a line going that way. In fact, this corner, you would also extend it, but because it's sort of behind the face, we wouldn't actually see it unless your character's made out of Jell-O, which I strongly suggest you making lots of Jell-O characters. But if you want it to be an opaque, non-transparent character, then you wouldn't need to draw this line. So all we need to do then is just connect this shape, or this point to this point, and then this point to this point. And that gives you a very simple trapezoid. If you want to do it more like we have with Cube B, now this is going to take some practice because you've got not a straight vertical line like you do here, but it's at an angle. So I'll show you how I would draw that. So I would start with the left edge on this side, and this is going to be the longer edge, so this edge here. Then I'm going to go up. This line would still be parallel to this line, for the most part. And then this line would come down like this. This is going to be the back edge, and this line should be fairly parallel to this line. And then I do the same thing as topping off the cubes or the rectangular prism, and I create that top by intersecting those lines and then just getting rid of those points. Now that one, to me, looks maybe like it's not quite maybe a pure trapezoid, but that's a good starting place. You could more center it. I think if I had drawn a line like this to show me the center of that front face, and then I can maybe trim off this, siding it. Let's see. Yeah, I think this is a little bit cleaner, or more sort of in the correct perspective. Something like that, and then I could get rid of these guidelines as I've got it. So that looks maybe a little bit better. For the trapezoid, you can see this kind of shape would be really useful for like a torso or a waist of a character. So like their hips, how they might like flare out or get a little bit narrower. This is a really good shape for building more realistic characters. That you can use this shape to create more geometry, but then you'll have to go back and sort of like add more curves to make it more sort of curvaceous as a human character. So then we have the sphere. The sphere is obviously just a circle, and it's a bit tricky in terms of drawing convincingly if you're not using shading. So a sphere, and what can be really good to draw a sphere is actually, make a line, and then you do the endpoints like we did with the cylinder, and then you make another line that's the same length intersecting with the center of that original line. And then if you do points there, then curving out, if you can try to maintain that curve all the way around, that's going to give you a very nice sort of circle that you can draw without tracing something like a quarter or something like that. But if you want to trace from a sort of guide, you can do that for sure. So that's got me a circle like that. Now this is a flat circle. To make it a sphere, what we've got to do is we've got to actually curve it. So instead of why we're seeing this so flat is because these lines are flat and they appear to be flat on the surface. So if I get rid of those central lines but keep these same points, if I make that line more of a curve, that appears as though that sphere is curving in space. So you get the idea. You can kind of, if you've got a Pokemon ball laying around the house, you can take, as I happen to have, you can sort of take a look at it, and when it's like flat, it's still going to look a little flat, but as you turn it down, you can see the lines curve down or curve up. And so we're doing the same thing as we sort of look at with the sphere there. Now you can also do a curve here. So if you're thinking of it like a globe, the sort of like longitude and latitude lines that we have on a globe, it's going to have a very similar curve. So these can be anywhere, and you can do more than just two, but this is how we're going to get more of an illusion of the sphere. Now the other sort of ways that you can get the sphere to look more round is if you're using this as sort of you have a line here and a line here. You don't want, maybe you want to use this as the base of your character head. I wouldn't want to leave those lines there, but maybe I do think about how the eyes are arranged on this line, or even the mouth sort of like curves on that line, and that could help you create a more three-dimensional character. Or if they have like some sort of helmet on, so a lot of those shapes and things you build on top of it is going to help that sphere look more round. And finally, we have the irregular shape. And so for the irregular shape, this is just a shape that just looks irregular. We'll maybe think about 2 different ways that your irregular shape could be formed, but building off of like our cube A technique here. So an irregular shape, if I do one that's mostly like sort of geometric lines, so something like that, what you do is you create a line going back into the distance from each corner. And you want that to be fairly parallel. And then you got to connect where they're not hitting that front face. So for this one, I've got this line to connect, and it needs to be parallel to this line. This line needs to be projected back and connected to this line. And then this line needs to be connected to this line. Now, where do you connect it? Well, you really have to draw a line down here, sort of imagine it's there. That's the same length as this little line. And so then that'll allow this to sort of drop back down convincingly. And then this line comes up, and then this one goes back. So that would be how you could project back like a weird sort of geometric shape. If it's a curvy one, so let's see, we can draw maybe like, this kind of looks like a painter's palette. Now for this one, you got to eyeball this a little bit better, but it's going to go back from the curve. You go from the top of the curve to the bottom of the curve, and then to the bottom of the curve here, or the top of the curve here. And then you're going to take a look at that curve that you've got in the front, and you're going to do the best you can to emulate that curve as you're coming around on this side. So I'm going to come around here and try to get it so that completely mimicking this shape, and then this side's going back like that. Now I don't know what kind of character you could make with these guys, but it could be kind of cool to create, you know, sort of a weird shape. If I overlap another shape here on the front end, could also project that back. And then if I put some eyes on it, maybe turn this into like some sort of nose, I get a nice little like weird abstract pig or something, right? So then you've got your irregular shape. So for these, I've got the worksheet on the Dragon and Goat website and linked on the YouTube page here. So be sure to download this page and practice. You don't have to download it. You can just, you know, write the word cube on a piece of paper and then draw a few cubes. I'd say probably after you've drawn 10,000 of these, you'll have mastered 3D shapes. I'm still working on it, so I've got a little bit more to go before I've completely mastered them. But the more you practice, the more you'll sort of improve your drawing, and you know, remember, exercise that drawing muscle as you get better. Then you'll be ready for part 2, where we're actually going to take and stack these 3D shapes and then turn them into actual cartoon characters. Thanks for stopping by, and follow us at